Hello and welcome to 60 Minutes or Less, a podcast from Birthday Cake for Breakfast. I'm Andy Hughes, and for our second episode of 2025 we look to Chicago, joined by our very special guest, Brian Case of FACS. Cooler than cool, FACS have been on the radar for a number of years now, with each new release better than the next. No strangers to Birthday Cake for Breakfast, we've had a back and forth with the trio over the years, so thought it only right to have Brian get involved with the podcast. In February 2025, FACS will release their sixth album, Wish Defense, via their longtime home of Trouble in Mind Records. Rather uniquely, the album is the last record engineered by Steve Albini, he who produced records for, the likes of Pixies, Nirvana, the Jesus Lizard, and all your other favourite artists. We spoke of Albini and Electrical Audio when we caught up over Zoom in January, where we also touched on what it's like having a son whose band is signed to Matador, the joy of discovering something new before we had the internet, the scene in Chicago, and listening to music while walking the dog. As ever, if you like the episode, let us know. Follow us on your favourite streaming platform and follow us on the socials. Right, on to Brian Case. Enjoy!
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, man? You alright?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good, cheers. Where do we find you? Is it in the morning over there?
Yeah, 11:30, so almost afternoon.
What have you got on today? Have you got your interview sessions all lined up? Have you got...
Yeah, I had a couple earlier, and then I'm going to work.
Oh, cool. Do you still have like your kids at home and stuff? Because I was gonna say, it's interesting enough being a dad in the music business, but it must be even more interesting being a dad with a kid who's signed to Matador, you know?
Yeah.
How does that father-son dynamic shift when, you've got a kid signed to a massive indie? Is it hard to get him to tidy his, bedroom and stuff?
Yeah, no rules anymore. No, it's good. Asher's really chill, and it doesn't affect anything at all, other than who has the car when. So,
I liked something you posted on Insta about growing up yourself in a very supportive DIY scene and family, and that for you
Mhm.
it's been kind of similar in watching Asher and his bandmates grow up and communicate as a young band. So it must have been
Yeah.
special to have that sort of, almost like your own life relived through him and all his friends that he's doing the band with.
Yeah, it was really cool to be able to just like have a space where they could practice and to be able to, you know, be as involved as they wanted me to be for as long as they let me be, you know? Like now they're on their own trip and they do all their own stuff, but it was cool to be able to take them out on the road for the first couple shows and to just be able to give some advice just that was, some real, it's like I can't help you do your taxes, but I can tell you how to go on tour. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it was cool. I mean, I love it. I love their band, and I'm so excited for them. So
I bet as well, it's not the traditional like American father son share a catch. Now it's like
yeah,
helping you quickest way to load in,
yeah,
load out, and stuff like
exactly. Yeah, don't forget this if you're going to Europe. Like, yeah.
that. So we won't just talk about Asher. We will actually talk about yourself and
Mhm.
FACS. So I had the perfect listening experience to your new records the other day. So we had a total whiteout of snow.
Nice.
And on the dog walk, listening to Wish Defense, the new record, it perfectly soundtracked, that secluded, icy coolness and the crispness of the record. Do you ever think about seasonal listening when you're making a record? Does that ever impact the way you think about making a
Oh, for
record?
sure. Yeah, I do the same thing. Every night I go for a long dog walk, and if I'm by myself, I always listen to music, and I have always associated records with seasons. And when I'm making music, I think a lot about that, like how this record resonates in a certain time of year or when it was made and the difference between when it comes out, that kind of thing. Wish Defense was made in the spring, but is coming out in the winter, and it feels like a winter record to me, even though it was all written and conceived during warm months. So I'm glad that you picked up on that.
Yeah. I mean, does that obviously, like you say, you go out walking the dog and that's where you get a lot of your listening done and similar. And is that something where you think, do you think that far ahead in terms of this is, possibly going to be a winter release and maybe that crispness will come into it when you're producing it? Or is that all kind of like something that falls into place as well?
Well, I would say when we're recording it, we usually know it's not going to come out for 8 months or something. So, and just in terms of us and how we like plan and schedule, we do know when it's going to come out. I don't think it really affects any of the process, but it is like, however conscious or unconscious it is, I'm sure it plays a role.
You did a feature for us around the last record, Still Life and Decay, and you said it was always cool to come off the back of a last album release and then write a new song because that can mean that the material builds off what you've done previously and then
Mhm.
can help guide the rest of the songwriting in a new direction.
Right.
Did you find that kind of clicked into place with this new record as well? Were you coming off the back of that last album and saying, here's what?
Yeah. With this one, it was interesting because Still Life had not come out yet, and Aliana had left the band. So Jonathan had joined and was learning those songs, and we wanted to make sure that he felt like he was a part of the band and not just in like some, FACS cover band. So we wrote we wrote Ordinary Voices and a song called North America Endless, which was a single that came out last year. We wrote those with him so that he would have his own contribution to the set. It was a cool like way to sort of move beyond like enter sort of like a new phase almost where we were able to, Jonathan had his input and it was, he's melodically like a much different player than Aliana and it was cool just to like just kick right into this new album cycle with a couple new songs that were what we felt were like a little bit of a different direction.
Sure. And were you, because I think like Aliana, she fit the group so perfectly aesthetically,
Mhm.
as does Jonathan. Were you obviously pleased, I imagine, having Jonathan tag back in, having previously been there, and Aliana tag out, so to speak? But were you like gutted to lose her at the same time?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was really similar to when Jonathan left the first time. It was just like she just had some stuff going on she wanted to focus on, and we were totally respected that. And it was great because we were really like, what are we gonna do? We had no idea. Jonathan and Noah ran into each other at a bar, and Jonathan was like, "Hey, I heard Aliana's leaving, and I'd love to come back." And we were both like, "What? Like, really?" And it was great because we already have a language together musically, and we know that we get along with each other in a band for 2 weeks, and all the things that you sort of have to think about outside of like, is this person able to play this music? We already had the answers to, and that was really it made it much, much easier.
Do you think Jonathan might have been scoping out the bar for Noah that entire seems very
Well,
very happenstance.
yeah, they both work there, so
Right.
yeah. We were never like not friends or like it wasn't like we had to get over something. It was just like, everyone's got life things and you got to focus on that instead of, being creative.
I saw as well that Aliana was hanging out with Nick Cave recently as well, so she's got her
Yeah,
own vibes, hasn't she?
yeah, yeah. She's doing just fine.
In terms of Jonathan coming back, so he stepped away just before the release of Negative Houses, your debut album. So
Mhm.
how was that in itself, having him step away to do his own thing, just as, Fax is becoming a proper entity?
It was difficult in the sense that we had, made this record and, we had kind of broken up Disappears and we're like, we could have just kept being Disappears and got a new bass player or not, but we decided to make the like artistic decision to just start something new. So it was hard to have, gone through all that and then made this record that we were proud of and then have Jonathan, not be a part of everything that came with that. Those things are also really motivating, because you have to like make a decision that you weren't prepared to, and you have to plan differently, and you have to reach rejigger that chemistry. With Aliana, it was great because we decided we wanted to have somebody join who wasn't a bass player. You know, like Aliana was a drummer, not a bass player. And we were like, she'll have a really cool rhythm to contribute on an instrument that maybe she's not familiar with. I mean, we knew she could like play the instrument, but she hadn't played it in a band. So that was, it kind of just made it exciting and it made it like a challenge for us to sort of get out of our own heads about what we thought was happening or supposed to happen or, all that stuff. A similar thing where initially when he was in the band, he was the guitar player and I was the bass player on that first record. So we had switched roles and having him come in on an instrument that wasn't his, like, not the one that we had communicated with, and disappears we were both guitar players. That was an interesting challenge for him, and I think it made us make some different decisions too. So it's, just mix it up. It's usually better when you're not going along with the plan that you thought you had,
Thinking on your toes. I never
Yeah,
knew that.
exactly. Yeah.
I never knew that about Aliana being a drummer by
Mhm.
trade generally. And I knew that Jonathan had come onto the bass. And am I right in thinking that it was pretty much his first time taking the bass proper? Because he
Yeah,
was.
yeah. He played bass in a band that was very short-lived. I think it was the first time he had really like been able to write on the bass and compose and contribute in the way that we communicate. So
And obviously, you were both guitarists in the previous outfit that you were in.
mhm.
With you, like you say, the plan shifted and you jumped onto guitar instead of bass. And now that Jonathan's on bass himself, how do you think that's helped in terms of shifting the dynamic between you all?
I think just adding in like a different. Jonathan has a really good ear, and he approaches melody in a really cool way that the band hasn't in the past. I usually try to stay away from being too melodic, and Jonathan brings in that element, which I think just augments the way that I can react to it. I really try to let like the rhythm section is so strong. I try to stay out of their way and just complement them. So just by the nature of the fact that Jonathan is playing with like some different like melodic information, it makes me play differently and Noah as well. I think it's just kind of pushed the band like sideways in a way that felt like it was the right time for that.
And it seems very FACS as well.
Yeah, yeah, still like our trip, maybe with different sunglasses on or something.
I heard you say, actually, I thought you were going to say it just then, but I heard you say in a podcast that if the rhythm's good, everything's good.
Mhm.
And I think personally, along with the sideways shifting nature of it, that's one of the main pulls with FACS, a big part of the cool factor, in addition to the aesthetics and the striking artwork, is like, that strong bass and drums connection.
Yeah.
With that being a background that you were in as well with playing the bass, do you think that's what's resulted in it being such a big, strong part of the FACS identity, or do you think that's kind of just the way you all work together as players?
I think it's just like it's conscious. Like we wanted to really focus on the rhythm, and I think that's coming from like just the music that we're so influenced by. Like, we love like dub music, and we try to, in our own way, incorporate those ideas into what we're doing, and the way the dub influenced a lot of like, like Public Image, a lot of those bands. Like, we're really pulling from that like history, and those are our reference points. So we're doing our best to like honor that without just like aping it.
And
Yeah.
in terms of, the reference points and stuff, I did actually see the press release, and I appreciate press releases sometimes can be completely completely, off-piste, but it said, about filmmakers like David Lynch and Cronenberg and John Carpenter and
Yeah.
their depiction of the duality of man. That was something that crept in to how you guys have approached the themes of this record and stuff. Would you say creatives like those do factor into actual influences when it comes to this particular record or facts in general? Or again, is that just something that was scattershotted onto the press release?
No, I think I mean, like film is a big part of how we communicate with each other. We talk about movies a lot and reference them, and our a lot of times when we're writing, we're using visual descriptors instead of musical. And those are all directors that we love, and the absurd and the like horror, like that's just like a reflection of daily life for us, which is also another big part of how we communicate with each other and how we channel things. So no, those are all like very conscious. Like sometimes we meet more together on like a film than we do music. Like we all listen to pretty different music from each other. Even though we have lots of crossover, I would say film is where we all really start to sort of come together in a different unified way.
Right, okay. Were there any particular touch points that you all kind of came together with more recently?
Not specifically. A lot of times it happens like, when we're traveling and, we get to the hotel and we turn the TV on and we just find something and watch it together and talk about it or talk about what it reminds us of. Or there's almost nothing specifically I could think of that I think the last movies we all watched together was Pearl. Have you seen Pearl? Like
The
they're like
trilogy.
the trilogy, yeah. What we watched the first one together.
Is that X, the first one?
X. Yeah, we watched X, and it was like it got us talking about new movies versus old movies and the things that they were referencing, and it was just like we're all basically the same age, so we, kind of came up watching and listening to a lot of the same things and having that common ground. Yeah, it's kind of just the way the conversation starts more than like specifics.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I do like as well, I've not been there for a while, but like when you switch on American TV, sometimes you do have these films that are pretty extreme, but it can be like
Yeah.
when you've turned the telly on in the hotel and it can be any time of day just because it's that sort of cable, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you could be watching like The Godfather at 9 a.m. or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's always like the fun part of you check into the room and then it's just roulette. Like, all right, let's find something weird. Yeah.
Do you have like, I think you've pretty much touched on it, but like those sorts of VHS memories of, does that just all go into the melting pot when it comes into this sort of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. It's always just like, we're always saying different lines to each other and we're always, from our childhood or, like that aesthetic too, like that quality of like watching and like even the idea that like you had to wait for something to come out. Nowadays, I feel like everything is just so instant. These records come out and they're in your pocket, and the movie like in the theater is also showing on TV. And like I think just growing up like we did, where you had to find things or wait for them or be told about them by a friend or discovery, like a lot of that discovery era is gone for a lot of people because it just everything is available at all times. So I think that also is like just something that lives in our heads and is still like inspiring to us, like finding new things and or rediscovering.
The idea of that as well, like, because I think I was just at the last grasp of that before the internet came in and stuff, and still remember finding things. And the very idea that you can now watch an entire film on a tiny phone the size of a Game Boy, from when I was
Yeah.
a kid, just seems insane to me. But obviously, that's how a lot of people consume stuff. But I was going to ask you actually, in fact, in terms of the way records are promoted and the way records come out these days, you around Void Moments created like a hotline for people, didn't you, in Chicago?
Hmm.
And put
Yeah.
up like posters, and it was like an old school promotional effect, and like asking people to call this number, and it was all like secretive, and then obviously COVID hit, so that kind of put a spanner
I'm
in.
not exaggerating. Those posters went up the day before like the city shut down. So it was sort of creepy that people did see it and actually call because nobody was on the streets, like it was like everybody's work shut down and like it was crazy. But it was cool. I think it was like my best idea that kind of never got to go anywhere fully. It was cool. Like I loved it. We got some crazy phone calls and it was just like fascinating like who would call and what they would say or what they thought it was about or because we were really just like, there was like a message that was just like kind of cryptic and, then a beep and people just started talking and there was some wild shit.
Because that in itself almost feels like John Carpenter, They Live
Yeah,
type story, doesn't it?
yeah, totally. Yeah.
These posters that go up around town right before a
Mhm.
pandemic.
Yeah.
But it must have been, yeah, it must have been gutting to have that idea and then all of a sudden you've got all these posters up and nobody can actually leave the house. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It was I mean, it was such a bizarre time for everyone that it just added to the terror.
the weirdness of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that was only 5 years ago, which even it being 5 years ago seems mental, but it
Yeah.
was right before a pandemic. But how do you feel about promoting a record in 2025 compared to then? Even that seems a crazy long time ago compared to you.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what it means anymore. Like, I don't know if it will get reviewed. I don't know if anyone's gonna care about it. We kind of just go on the faith of like, we put this record out and somebody agreed to let us play at their club and we're just gonna see what happens. I don't know. Promoting is such a weird, like, I guess I look at it more as like support than promoting. Let's go, like, somebody put this record out for us. Let's do our part and go play some shows and meet some people and, just take advantage of these cool opportunities because they're not going to last forever. So,
Yeah, I think the word promotion, even though that's obviously been part of it since
mm,
day dot, does make it seem very corporate and yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
But I think as well, FACS very much seem like a band who've built up those sorts of connections and that sort of audience where even if you are chucking the record out there, not sure if it's going to be reviewed or what have you,
Mhm.
you've still got that backing of like, a core amount of people, I would think anyway.
Yeah, I think the people that have found this band and like this band are truly like into music and art and into like an experience. And I feel like really lucky that that's the kind of people that are drawn to us because that's the kind of people that we are as well. Like I love going to see bands I've never heard. I love going to shows. I always want to like be in that room, like that communication, whether it's like a packed room or there's 10 people there, like there's still this like interaction that is so important. I feel like that's going away for a lot of people, so I'm glad it still exists.
Mm. And in terms of that promotional tactic, or rather that support tactic with the Void Moments record, is there anything like that that you would ever consider doing again? Have you got any ideas that you were cooking up at the time, or?
The one thing that never worked it was I actually after the Void Moments thing, we made a record pretty quick, and then the one following that, Still Life, during the time in between those, I took these classes at this public access TV station here just to get like certified to use the cameras in the studio. And I wanted to make this like TV show played on public access so anyone could see it. And it would just be this weird thing that existed and do like 4 episodes that were sort of like tied to the record. But they couldn't do live music. I wanted it to be like us playing. So it kind of just got shuffled aside. I want to revisit it because I think it could be so weird and cool. Yeah, I think I need more help. I can't do it by myself.
Seems like an Adult Swim sort of thing to.
Yeah, like just some like imagine like, just like driving down the street and you see these 10 posters with this weird phone number on it. It's like you're just flipping through the channels late at night and you just come up upon this weird like show. Like there's so many like public access shows from like New York and San Francisco from the late 70s with like bands playing and like I just like, Flipper on public access TV. Like what the hell? Can you imagine if you just turned that on? It was wild. You can watch them all on YouTube now, but it's like just this idea that there's just like it just kind of plays into the like underground and I'm still just fascinated by like just people being themselves. Yeah.
And that very idea of, like you say, flipping on the telly and just finding something, like I'm sure you were totally the same when you were growing up, but just seeing something come on at 2 a.m. and
Oh
being
yeah.
and being like, what was that? and then
Yeah,
you either never find out or you see it again a week later and you're like, oh wow, it's that thing, and just
yeah,
that discovery. Yeah.
totally. I mean, that's how I found so much music, like watching in 120 minutes, or like, just like that was the the internet back then was just like late night TV, like or like, we had this station Night Flight, where they just show weird movies or like, yeah, that was how you were like discovering stuff.
And now you can't even watch TV without it being some tellies without them being, plugged into the internet. So it's like that's
Oh
kind of
yeah, totally. Of
yeah,
course. Mhm.
kind of gone now. The the film chat that we were talking about before, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a Richard Ayoade film called The Double,
Mm-mm.
and it's got Jesse Eisenberg in it, and it's based on a Dostoevsky thing about this guy. It's basically about doppelgangers. We're segueing back into a normal question here, but it's basically about doppelgangers and such, and body doubles and what have you. And I read that the album's lyrics for Wish Defense
Mhm.
are, tackling that sort of idea of who you actually are, what your motivations are, and are you being your true self or are you being performative when you're out there in real life? So, what is it about that sort of thing that connected you so much with the lyrics, and what was your thought process behind that?
Well, I had read this book about doppelgangers by this woman, Naomi Klein, and she talks about just being confused for another writer who was writing about similar things and sort of living in the same kind of space online. And they were actually like very opposite from each other in their approaches to things, but because their names were very similar and their appearances were relatively similar, they would get confused for each other all the time. And it just was really fascinating to me. And I think it plays into making music and like how what people perceive of you from what they read or know and what you really like, or even just being on stage. Like, how do you get up there and play? And are you acting when you're up there? Like, are you doing things that will get a response? Are you having a bad day and you're not letting that affect you? Like those sort of things. And I don't know, it's always helpful to have like an idea in mind when we're making a record because it just gives it some structure or gives you another place to go if you're stuck. That's just the one that kind of came up with this one.
I heard elsewhere as well that you personally touch on like relationships and moving through people's lives and the idea of memory and time as lyrical themes as well. Is that
Yeah,
again, is that again something that you have in the back pocket, or is that something that you find consciously returning to in themes?
I always am thinking about that stuff. I think about memory all the time. And, even this record is like, there's moments where it's like a future you looking back at your past and, like trying to find like that space in between of where you are. And yeah, I mean, it just like relationships and time and memory. It's like, it's a part of everything, you know?
And as well as that, when you open the door personally for yourself, I imagine where you live has so much going on in terms of like, the news and stuff. And like
Yeah.
with the single that you talked about on Sub Pop, North America Endless, at the
Mhm.
time you said it's about that disassociation you need to live in the States and the powerlessness that that can bring.
Yeah.
That only came out in April of last year, and
Mhm.
already we're like, whoa.
Yeah. We're past that.
So like who knows what was even going on in April 2023, let alone 2024. But how is it getting on with things back home from a creative standpoint? And do you ever think that that helps or hinders your creativity?
I think it helps in terms of just being motivated to continue like question these things. You know what I mean? Just having the ability to like take a step back and having an idea from the past of how things are and what they could be, and then looking at the future. I think it seems to be helpful, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. I don't know. Anything, you know, I think it's purposefully chaotic now so that nothing seems off limits, and I'm curious how far that's gonna get pushed.
Yeah. Do you think with that sort of thing, obviously there's a music podcast rather than a political podcast. But do you think that sort of thing, yeah, there will be a breaking point, or
There has to be, right?
yeah, it's hard to figure out what's gonna or where things are gonna go. I
I
mean,
mean, it's like maybe a little cliche, but I mean, look at Rome. Like the end of Rome was Christianity became more important than the government. Everything was made to benefit the wealthy, and there was a plague that meant people couldn't like work or live. And I mean, here we are. This is where we are, you know? So it's like,
I'll be talking to you in 10 years' time on whatever the new device is then as well, and we'll be
exactly.
interested in this, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, d does that as well affect the way you guys work as a band in terms of how you can get about and how you can live as a band? Because I know that over here, the way the laws changed with coming out of Europe, has drastically affected how people can tour the States and can tour
Oh
Europe.
yeah.
So is that even where you're living? Has that changed things or?
For sure. I mean, just the ability for us to do things is different now because of, like Brexit and because of whatever's going to happen with this new political administration. And also just the bottom line of like, can we afford to do this? Like as things get more and more expensive and like this tour we have coming up, we're not going to England because we couldn't afford to. Like nobody wanted to give us any money and it would have been expensive. So we're like, let's just go when we can just go there instead of having to deal with getting across the channel and like it doesn't make financial sense, even though most of the people that we talk to are English who are interested in our band, but it's like we
Yeah.
can't afford to do this. Like so we
Yeah.
have to wait till the record comes out and then maybe some people will see that we've got a little traction and they'll be more willing to like book us some shows and do some stuff. So it's really like, yeah, I would say everything is affected, like everything.
And do you get those really annoying messages where you'll say, "FACS are going on tour," and then someone will say, "Oh, you're not coming to Coventry," or "You're not coming to wherever."
Yeah, but I never find it annoying. I'm always flattered that someone's like, come see me, and it's like I will come see all of you if I, we just need to make sure we can pay the bills.
Yeah. I like the honesty of people where they say, I've seen some bands where they say like, come to Australia, and they're like, "We've never been asked. No
Yeah,
one's asking us at present."
that's a perfect example. We get a lot of that, and it's like Australia 2025. It's like, yes, please. Like, bring me. Like, I'm ready to go. Tell me when and where.
With a bag of Australian dollars as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sometimes it's like our whole thing is like time over money. Like, are we going somewhere for 3 days and we're not going to lose our shorts? Like, because that's worth it, as opposed to like, we don't need to all come home with a grand. We just, unless we're gone for, X amount of days and blah, blah, blah. We're taking off work and all that stuff. So
It
we're more
just needs
about
to work.
the experience. Yeah, it just needs to work. And sometimes that means you just have a good time and you don't spend a bunch of money. And sometimes that means you make a bunch of money.
And you have a good time.
Yeah.
So, in terms of that, obviously, the UK, as you say, it's a place that you guys would want to come to, but it's got to make sense and such. I found it interesting that FACS itself, in terms of the name of the band, is a nod of the head to Factory, the Manchester label, and
Mhm.
everything else, which was totally left field for me. I never would have guessed that that's where that came from. But it makes a lot of sense musically because you Fax does sound like, face it, a band that was on Factory that you'd see in one of these Manchester venues and what have you. So like, has Factory been like a big thing for you and for Fax? And do you have any particular Fact favorites?
I mean, I love the label as a record label that seemed to be adventurous and do what they wanted and, have some sort of ethics about why they did what they did. But I think outside of the musical reference points, it's just like an inspiring, like I'm more inspired by like Tony Wilson and just the ideas about what music means and what it means to people or how it functions in society. And that was really what the factory nod is too, is, it's a clue about where we're coming from in terms of influence, but it's also like, I love that they like Tony Wilson's gravestone, it has a factory catalog number. It's like I just love the idea that it's like it exists beyond being like a record label. Like they had a building that they made to like help their bands, but also for Manchester. They did all this stuff for the city, and they were very much about where they were at and where they supporting the place that they were. And I think that's a great way to like look at things. And that we all feel that way about Chicago. Like we love the city. They've supported us. We try to support them and do as much as we can here. I think it's just a good way to like model your behavior.
And what is it about Chicago that is so like that way minded? Because there's so many bands that come out of Chicago, and like you say, it is very much. It seems like such a hub of creativity where everyone looks after each other and such. What is it about the place? Is
Yeah.
that just pretty much?
I think it's just that there's not a competitive like spirit here. That it's really collaborative. Lots of people play in other people's bands. There's lots of music scenes that cross each other. There'll be a show with a jazz band and like a rock band. That's not uncommon at all. I just think it's the city like really fosters a community, and I think that's rare in music. I think a lot of places it's just competitive and it just seems like careerist in a way. And here I think it's a collaboration and it's supportive. I don't know another way to like really say that. It's people are just interested in something new. So that I think promotes a lot of people to go out there and check out things and also to get outside of your box.
I think I saw something, I forget who it was, but they wrote a thing about being able to hop on their bike and they were at the Empty Bottle 1 minute, they were at another show the next minute, and then they were at another show the next minute, and they managed to catch like, three huge shows in the
Yeah,
space of
yeah,
like one evening because, maybe they watched the headliner and then they watched the opener and then they watched
yeah,
whoever.
yeah.
And that seems like such, I mean, admittedly, you could do that in Manchester, and I have done that before, but that does seem like such a cool idea that you could just do that. And like you say, there's so many scenes going on.
There's a lot of like pockets that are pretty dense. So you can like, bop around inside of those and have a few different experiences in a night. And I think that's also just part of why like it's like the city feels like a small town a lot of times because you're in these like pockets where you are seeing the same people that you recognize but may not have a relationship with. And I feel like that just creates like a community as well, just being familiar with your surroundings and the people that inhabit it, even if you don't, directly communicate with them.
Yeah. And with Chicago as well, the new record, and previous records as well, you've put them out via, well, not via, but you've recorded at Electrical Audio. Is it
Mhm.
pretty amazing as well having that just on your doorstep near enough,
Yeah,
in Chicago and being able to go there and it being like a famed place to record, and at the end of the day, it literally just being an institution in Chicago.
yeah, it's wild. Like I live, I drive by it every day. It's like a mile from my house. I work around the corner from there. It's crazy to think that this place that is legend to so many people. I mean, we don't take it for granted, but I think we take for granted the fact that it exists and we are able to go there. And it's easy for us to do that because it is such a unique and special place. And I mean, it is like a world class, world famous studio run by people that are way out of our league. But they still welcome us and we are friends and I love it there. So it's so cool. I mean, I've been in the kitchen there and talked to Kim Deal, like you run into people there that you would never ever cross paths with. It's really special. It's cool.
Not too dissimilar, I imagine, to Abbey Road in the sense that they are at the end of the day a studio. So you
Yeah.
see bands like on really small bands where they'll be like, "Fucking hell, we did the mastering at Abbey Road," and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they'll, yeah,
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It's
and
cool that those, I mean, those places aren't going to be around forever. So just having the ability to like participate in part of their history is it feels special still. I'm still like always so happy that we got to do another record at Electrical or whatever it is.
Yeah. And with the latest record, it was the final album engineered by Steve Albini
Yeah.
and recorded for 2 days in May last year. Was
Mhm.
that pretty nuts, number one, having it be the last record engineered by him, but number two, everything that went around at the time in terms of, his sad passing? Like, was it pretty nuts at
Yeah,
the time?
it was wild. We have made so many records at Electrical, but we never recorded with Steve until that single, that Sub Pop single, and we were like, let's just do a day with him and see how if we have fun and how it turns out. So we did that single and it was great. We got along really well and we worked really well together. So we're like, let's do the album. Like this was fun. Steve's cool. It's where we would be making this anyway. And we were happy. The first 2 days we were working really fast. We were way ahead of schedule. The whole idea was just record it and mix it with Steve in a week. So we booked Monday to Friday. Yeah, on Wednesday morning I woke up to take my daughter to school and I had a message from the studio to call them and I called them and they were like, Steve died. He died a couple hours after we were together the night before. And it was crazy. And, there was a lot of like mixed emotions about us being the band that he was working on or us being the people that he was with for so much time before he died. The studio called that night and was like, do you want to come finish this record? And it really encouraged it. Like, I don't know, if they wouldn't have called, we wouldn't have known what to do. You know what I mean? Like, they were very much instrumental in us, like, getting the record done and making us feel like that was something we actually could do. Like, we were kind of like, we have to wait and see what happens because, like, the mics were still up, like, the tape was still on the machine. We were going back in the morning. So, yeah, I really credit them with making us feel like we could finish that. Without that, it would have, I don't know what we would have done. Yeah.
And do you think that is something that will always be something that you think about with Wish Defense, the fact that it was this?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like it will never not, I don't think this record will ever be mentioned without that being a part of it. You know what I mean? And I think it's cool that, Steve was recording a band like ours when that happened because I feel like in a lot of ways our band is what he championed, just like some very like regular people. We're not a big band. We're not like successful. We don't, like or just do our thing because we love it. And I feel like he was always very supportive of people like that. So it feels good to have that connection with him.
That seems like the electrical audio bread and butter as well, doesn't it?
For sure. Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are like they service the music community in Chicago.
And how was that just going in the next day and seeing, like the equipment and the setup and stuff? Was it just
It was crazy. It was weird. I mean, like we only had a few things left to do in terms of recording. So our friend Sanford Parker came and he was friends with Steve and we had worked together many times. So it was felt good that we had a friend there and somebody who could just sort of literally walk in and see what was going on and know like how to go. It was just like a half day and everyone was sort of dazed about like I had to sing like one or two more songs and we did some overdubs, but we were really just like it was just such a feeling. It was really heavy. And all the staff stopped by and said hi and there was a lot of emotions. They had all gathered there the day before and I think they just sat in that room that we were recording in and just spent some time seeing his last like session, like privately just looking over like how things were left and it felt like yeah, it was heavy. Yeah. But the spirit of him was very much there when they were like, let's finish this record, And it was like, yeah, we gotta finish this. Like, what are we gonna do? Not finish it? Like
it feels very much, yeah, like if it was somebody else, maybe it would have been let's shut down the studio for a week. But with
yeah,
him, maybe even it could have been something that was written into his will was like,
yeah, finish the session. Well, my buddy John, who mixed ended up mixing the record, he sent, everybody was making so many posts around then, but he put up a quote about Steve where he said like, I want to die with unfinished business. I want to have a session in the works. I want to be making plans for the next week. I want to basically, like die with my boots on. So, being a part of that is cool, I guess.
And it would be disingenuous the other way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like I remember when Marky Smith died from the fall, and a lot of the obituaries were like, "Oh yeah, we played with him. He was a total prick." And it was like he did this and he did that, but once in a lifetime, blah 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 blah. So the records will be coming out probably the week this goes out, I think. And you are off to Europe, though not
Hmm.
UK, as we've discussed. For the three of you, are there any particular things that you are buzzing about when you come to Europe in terms of like food and all the rest of it?
It's just cool to be out of the country and we still love the fact that like when you're a band on tour, you get like the inside perspective, like we're meeting people and going to a bar or a restaurant it feels like a secret or like something you would know about if you were traveling in another way. And we all still really enjoy that aspect of it. We always travel with just the three of us, so it's cool to just be in a car and just have like that energy and like, just be in like a zone that you're going to be in for a while. Our booking agent is a good friend and he always comes out for a couple of days with us, so we're going to hang out with him, which is super fun. And yeah, just seeing people that we've known through the years, and it's all just like any tour, there's ups and downs, but there's always like we're just feel really lucky that we're actually able to still do some of this stuff. So, yeah.